October 2023. A Pentagon employee is standing in his own backyard when something silent, triangular, and almost see-through drifts 300 feet over his head. He works for the people who are supposed to know. He didn't know. His file just became one of 41 the government finally let you read. Welcome back to Yesteryear Secrets, the channel where the past refuses to stay buried. If you've been with us for the last couple of videos, you already know the shape of this story. The Pentagon has been declassifying UAP files in waves since April of 2026. 5 batches now, 41 records in this latest drop alone, pulled from the Defense Department, the FBI, the CIA, the State Department, and the Executive Office of the President. We've already walked through the loud ones, the gulf of omen orbs that seemed to answer back when a gunship opened fire, the silent triangle over Bagram, a sphere that fell out of the sky in Brazil in 1963, Navy footage from Tremonton, a baseball manager's home movie from Montana. Those cases are done. We're not repeating them today. But before we open the next 3 files, it's worth remembering why any of this is even possible to talk about right now. For most of the last 80 years, this subject lived in exactly one place, Rumor, a rancher's field in New Mexico in 1947. The Air Force's own Project Blue Book, 22 years and 12,000 sightings, closed in 1969 with nothing officially resolved. Pilots and radar operators who told the same quiet story for decades and were handed the same quiet denial every single time. That was the pattern for 3 generations. See something, report it, watch it disappear into a drawer. Then, in April of 2026, that pattern broke. A White House directive ordered the rolling declassification of aerial phenomena records, and batch by batch, then a second wave, a third, a fourth, the drawers actually started opening. Not all at once, on a schedule, which tells you this was never an accident. It was a decision made deliberately to let the public catch up in pieces instead of all at once. Now we're at batch 5. 41 more files, and buried inside it are 3 more cases almost nobody is talking about. And one of them starts in a place you'd never expect a declassified government secret to begin. Somebody's backyard. Stay with me. Because by the end of this video, you're going to understand why a Pentagon employee's own home movie ended up in the same government archive as combat footage from a war zone, and what that tells you about how close this subject has always been to ordinary life. Let's get into it. 1. The man who worked for the Pentagon. Here's the detail that should stop you before we even get to what he saw. This witness didn't stumble onto some fringe corner of the internet looking for aliens. He worked for the Pentagon. His job, in some capacity, involved the very institution that has spent 70 years deciding what you were and weren't allowed to know about the sky above your own house. And in October of 2023, at his home in Colorado, shortly before 11 at night, he stepped outside and looked up. Picture it exactly as he described it. No warning, no siren, no news alert, no reason to expect anything at all. Just an ordinary night, the kind you've had 1,000 times, standing in your own yard with nothing on your mind. And then, low in the sky, possibly as low as 300 feet, according to his own account, something moving. A triangle. Not a rough, blurry impression of a triangle the way eyewitness sketches usually go. A perfect triangle. No extra wings, no fins, no bubble canopy, no visible engine housing. Nothing that matched a single aircraft he, a man who worked inside the Pentagon, could put a name to. And here's the part that makes your skin change temperature a little. He said it looked almost see-through. Sit with that phrase for a second. Not translucent like glass, not invisible. Almost see-through, the kind of description a careful, precise witness reaches for when the honest answer is stranger than any word he has for it. As it moved off, He watched a band of silverish blue light trail behind it. It held a straight path, a consistent elevation, the physics of an ordinary object. Nothing about it screamed anomaly, until, without warning, it broke that pattern completely and pitched into an almost vertical position, a maneuver that a fixed-wing aircraft at that altitude, at that speed, has no business making. His wife saw it too. That detail matters more than it might seem to on the surface. This isn't an account resting on one set of eyes, one nervous system, one imagination working overtime in the dark. Two witnesses, independently oriented to the same patch of sky, watching the same silent shape do something neither of them could explain. And here's the question worth sitting with before we move on. This man had access, on some level, to the very institution that classifies and controls information like this. And he still didn't know what he was looking at. If insiders don't automatically know, what does that actually tell you about how tightly this information has really been held and who it's been held from? 2. A video out of the Middle East. Now travel somewhere else entirely. 2025. A populated area in the Middle East under U.S. Central Command's watch. This case doesn't come with a backyard or a wife as a second witness or a name attached to a face. It comes with something colder and, in its own way, harder to argue with. Military aircraft footage. Watch the file the way the analysts who first logged it would have. A camera mounted on U.S. military hardware doing exactly what it's built to do. Scanning, tracking, recording whatever passes through its field of view over territory the U.S. was actively watching. And then, without warning, something does exactly that. An unidentified object crosses the frame. Fast. Fast enough that the file's own language describes it as zooming across the screen, not drifting, not hovering, not behaving like a bird riding a thermal or a drone catching a breeze. Zooming, deliberate, directional. Here's what you have to understand about a file like this one. This isn't a shaky cell phone video shot by somebody looking up from a rooftop, uploaded and forgotten. This is footage from a military aircraft, operating under U.S. Central Command. Over a populated area the United States was actively monitoring for very different reasons entirely. Reasons that had nothing to do with unidentified objects. And in the middle of that footage, doing the job it was built to do, the camera caught something nobody was looking for. That's not a small detail. When your surveillance apparatus is pointed at one problem and it accidentally documents an entirely different one, an object crossing a monitored airspace with a speed and a trajectory nobody assigned to it and nobody can explain. You don't get to file that under coincidence and move on. The case remains, in the government's own language, unresolved. No explanation offered, no aircraft identified, no drone claimed. Just a clip, time-stamped, filed, and, for a while, kept. 3. Two shapes in the infrared. And then there's the one that isn't finished yet, the one that happened this year, somewhere in the western United States. A U.S. government special agent, not a hobbyist, not a conspiracy researcher, someone whose actual job involves paying close attention, captures infrared footage of something moving through the sky. Picture what that camera actually shows. Not a shape you'd recognize on sight. Not running lights, not a fuselage, not a silhouette you could match to a known aircraft type. Just two areas of contrast. What the file itself calls black hot. Cooler than their surroundings. Dense enough to register as distinct shapes against a thermal background, moving together. Slow. Deliberate. Not scattering the way debris would. Not behaving like birds, which never hold a perfectly matched pace side by side for minutes at a time. 5 to 10 minutes. That's how long the agent tracked them together, moving as a pair, before they passed out of view and the footage simply ends. No explanation follows, no debris, no radar correlation offered in the file. Just an agent, a camera, and two shapes that shouldn't have been cold in exactly the way they were cold. Holding formation for longer than a coincidence usually holds together, and then gone. This is the newest case in the entire 41-file release, which means, unlike Brazil in 1963 or Tremonton in 1952, nobody has had 70 years to quietly build a comfortable explanation for it. This one is still raw, still open. Whatever it was, it happened within the same 12 months you're living in right now. And think about what that timing actually does to the story. Every other case in this release has had decades to get smoothed over, sanded down into an old family anecdote, a grainy photograph nobody quite trusts anymore, a footnote easy to wave away because the people involved have mostly moved on or passed on entirely. This one hasn't had time to do that yet. The agent who watched those two shapes cross the frame is, in all likelihood, still working the same job today. The file hasn't had a chance to calcify into folklore. It's still just a report, recent, specific, unresolved, sitting in the same database as a home movie from 1950. 4. Why these three together? Here's what connects a Colorado backyard, a Middle East war zone camera, and an infrared blob over the western U.S. Three cases that, on paper, have almost nothing in common. None of them come with a smoking gun photograph. None of them hand you a clean answer. What they hand you instead is something quieter and, honestly, more convincing. Ordinary observation platforms, a man's own eyes, a military aircraft's camera, a federal agent's thermal scope, independently documenting something that didn't fit in three completely different parts of the world, in three completely different years. It was never just about the shape in the sky. It was about who was standing underneath it when it happened. A Pentagon employee, a Central Command aircrew, a government agent. People whose entire professional life is built around not overreacting to nothing. Notice what none of these witnesses had in common with each other. Different states, different countries, different chains of command. No shared motive to coordinate a story. No shared audience to perform for. A man in his backyard in Colorado has never met the air crew flying over the Middle East. Neither of them has ever met the agent watching the infrared feed out west. And yet, each of them ends up in the same government archive, filed under the same broad category, kept out of public view for exactly the same reason. Because somebody, somewhere, decided that what they saw wasn't ready for you yet. To be fair, and this channel always tries to be fair with you, none of these three cases prove anything otherworldly. A triangle at night can, in theory, be a testing platform nobody's supposed to talk about. A zooming object on a Middle East feed can, in theory, be a drone nobody correctly logged. Two black-hot shapes in infrared can, in theory, be balloons, or birds flying unusually close, or an artifact of the sensor itself. Keep every one of those possibilities in your back pocket. A healthy question is worth more than a comfortable answer, and this channel isn't in the business of telling you what to believe. But here's what doesn't fully go away, even after you account for every mundane explanation on the table. 3 trained, credible, unconnected observers on 3 separate continents worth of distance apart, looking up at 3 different moments in time, and describing independently objects that moved like nothing they'd ever been trained to recognize. That's not proof of anything otherworldly, but it's not nothing either. 5. What you're actually looking at. Step back for a second and look at the shape of this entire release, not the objects in it, but the release itself. 41 files, 5 separate agencies, 76 years of history, and scattered through all of it, cases that don't cluster around one kind of witness, one kind of location, or one kind of explanation. a farmer's field in Brazil, a Navy officer's camera in Utah, a baseball manager's movie reel in Montana, a gunship over the Gulf of Oman, a silent triangle over a war zone, and now, a man's own backyard. A military camera watching the wrong thing at the right moment. A federal agent's thermal scope, still warm from an encounter that happened this year. Newly released historical documents like these don't get declassified because nothing was ever there. They get declassified because the cost of holding the secret finally outweighed the comfort of keeping it quiet. And that's really the story underneath every one of these files, more than any single triangle or orb or black hot shape ever could be. It was never really about what was in the sky. It was about who decided you didn't need to know it was there, and how long they were willing to let that decision stand. So, here's what I want you to sit with tonight. A Pentagon employee looked up from his own backyard and saw something he couldn't name. A military camera, pointed at one problem, accidentally documented another. A federal agent watched two shapes hold formation in the cold, for minutes this year, not decades ago, this year, and then lost them. 3 files, 3 witnesses with every reason to be believed and no reason to lie, and 35 more sitting in that same release we haven't even opened yet. If this is the kind of secret history you want more of, you already know what to do. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and drop a comment telling me which of these 3 cases you can't stop thinking about. The backyard, the border, or the black hot shapes out west. Until next time, keep asking the questions they hoped you'd forget to ask. I'll see you in the next one.